There's less than 3 weeks to go before the election, and yes, more ads are on the way. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state government, sometimes the federal government, and how it just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. We've kind of taken a couple months off for the summer, but the election is upon us and we're back. Good to have you with us to talk about all of these developments leading up to November 4th. On my left, Bob Gough is editor of QuincyJournal.com. Welcome back, Bob.
Thanks, Bernie.
Hope you had a nice summer.
Did.
Nicole Wilson is here. The name keeps changing of the organization, but it is now 24/7 News. She is State House correspondent and provides information to radio stations all across the state and some other news outlets as well. Yes. Nicole, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, Bruce Rauner, Pat Quinn, they just had a debate in Peoria this last several days. How did they do, and how is this race looking, Bob?
It looks like Rauner's been prepped a little more.
The answers,
the debate? As far as the debate goes, yes. Okay. He's still not a lot of specifics, but he seems to be mastering the material a little more. I think he's doing a lot better as he heads down the stretch. I think when you look at Pat Quinn, he looks he's got a little grumpy old man to him now. His face gets a little red, and he gets a little puffy, and the veins are popping.
Well, they've both been under a quite significant attack,
as we know. No doubt about it. But
yeah.
But again, I still think this one is too close to call, even as we have oodles of debates heading down the stretch.
I agree. It's too close to call at this point. I believe the last poll that we saw was 44-41 Quinn, but a 3% margin of error, which means we essentially have a dead tie heading into this race with less than 3 weeks left for them to try to win voters over. We have seen lots of ads under attack, each one of them under attack. I think their sticking lines are great. Governor Quinn's, did Bruce Rauner really think no one would find out? He's attacking him on several areas. And then Bruce Rauner's tagline, Governor Quinn wants 4 more years. Right. And so you have these taglines from attack after attack on a whole wide variety of different issues. And so I agree with Bob. Bruce Rauner looked much more prepared for the second debate out of Chicago.
Okay, and you were right. And I said Peoria, but it was Chicago, and it was at actually the DuSable Museum of African American History. So starting in a new season, here we go. And it was interesting because there were a lot of issues really dealing with the city of Chicago and African American voters. Bruce Rauner has tried. We know that other Republican governors have had some success. Jim Edgar had some success. Bruce Rauner has always said he wants 20% of the total vote in the city of Chicago, and because if Republicans can cross that barrier, then they can, make up the other big Democratic advantage in Cook County. Do we think that Rauner has built to that, or will the Democratic base, which often includes many African American voters in the 90% usually, come back to Governor Quinn? Do we have any idea how this is going?
It seems like Rauner has made some headway. He's gotten some of the endorsements he's gotten out of Chicago, especially from the black ministers. I think he's made some headway here, and I know the population is completely different in terms of just the sheer numbers, but I would assume that Rauner will do better in Cook than, say, Brady did, but I don't think he'll do as well in Sangamon County as Brady did, but because of the whole state government issue and how the union thing.
Right.
Yes. But again, you're talking about such a huge population dichotomy there that any gains he makes up north will surely offset any losses he has downstate.
And part of the reason Bruce Rauner is doing so well among African Americans right now is because they're saying we've been loyal to the Democratic Party and we aren't really seeing results, especially in terms of education. So you have a former Senator, Reverend James Meek, jumping on board supporting Bruce Rauner, saying, hey, you're going to have to fight for our vote. Our vote matters, and charter schools has been a big issue. That's why the rooftop pastor Corey Brooks jumped on board with Bruce Rauner, saying our kids
got on a rooftop until an old building was demolished in his neighborhood
because he wanted to start a youth center.
Right,
so
right.
He's backing Bruce Rauner for education and youth, and hopefully, in his words, improving the community and the lives of those people.
On the other hand, Governor Quinn has certain people on his side like Michelle and Barack Obama who continue to be popular in Chicago, and Michelle did a television ad for him. And so obviously we're going to see support
President
on that
Obama coming back.
That's right,
This
for a
weekend.
second
He'll be
visit.
in Chicago, trying to get people to get out to the to vote early, get to the polls early, and that way you don't have to go and fight the crowds on Election Day.
Yeah, I did hear, just speaking of kind of particularly the Springfield crowd, one of the radio stations in town this week was playing a tape that they might have gotten from one of the unions, but it was Bruce Rauner in 2011 talking about how public pay and pensions are a financial tumor on society, which of course it's the kind of thing he talked about. The problem with government unions before the primary, and as soon as he won the primary, he didn't say that anymore. Sure. But I know the AFL-CIO has sent out, flyers to the homes of their members, and it's not as big a union state as it used to be, but there is still that. And how big a factor is this going to be?
Although doesn't Governor Quinn have problems with AFSCME, for example?
He does, yeah, but AFSCME, I believe, is on his side this time, right, because they fear Rauner more.
But AFSCME made it very clear when they endorsed Quinn that we're not necessarily endorsing him because we think he's great. Right. We're endorsing him because we don't want Bruce Rauner.
Right. And Quinn, of course, signed the pension reform bill, which cuts some future benefits, even from retirees, cuts that 3% annual increase in particular down some because they have the $100 billion pension problem. Now, all indications are that the state Supreme Court is going to overturn that law, and we don't know what Plan B is yet after that. Bruce Rauner talks about he wants pensions to go, everybody gets their pension up to now, we don't cut any pensions that are there, but even for current employees, they would go to a 401k type system tomorrow, which many people think that wouldn't pass constitutional muster, although of course Mr. Rauner says it would. So it's kind of the battling of perhaps lesser of evils for union folks.
I've been saying for quite some time, I think that at some point, and I don't know if they can get this done in the veto session, but at some point you are going to see taxing bodies. The state will create a pension levy for taxing bodies. I've been a firm believer that is going to happen. It's going to be the only way to solve it. That they're going to go to school districts and cities and whoever to say, okay, you can establish. Here's your nickel. Establish that, and you take care of it because we're done with it. Yeah. And it's probably going to be the only thing that makes this thing fly. The fact that they can solve that, but then will that solve it? Will it continue to grow at a rate where that won't even be enough? And then local bodies are then forced to just continue to increase that.
Yeah, and all of this problem, the problem of pensions is partly that there have been generous laws passed in the past, and the Constitution says you can't reduce somebody's pension if it's a public pension in Illinois, and the Supreme Court so far, at least in an insurance case where the state legislature tried to take away some of their lifetime insurance benefit for longtime state workers who had retired, they said, no, you can't take it away. You can't make those people pay premiums now when you made this promise before.
And one of the big things that hurt was that school districts across the state gave the retirement incentive bump to say, hey, tell me that you're going to retire in 3 years, and we're going to automatically lock in 6% bumps each of your last 3 years going out. Now that practice has been under some scrutiny. The Quincy School District, for example, voted to end the practice, and they won't allow that anymore. There won't be any spiffs. There won't be any incentives to get people to go ahead and retire. So I think if you see some other organizations start doing that, perhaps that's one way to kind of roll it back a little bit.
The city of Springfield tried to roll it. I believe they did roll it back in their police and fire pensions too. No more bumps at the end. Right. So interesting. I had a note here on negative ads, and people certainly are upset with negative ads. Obviously, the Quinns of the world and those on the Democratic side are pushing Rauner's business problems and lawsuits against his businesses and people who got in trouble with his businesses, and he keeps saying, well, I wasn't exactly there. And Rauner keeps saying Quinn is a failed governor and everything, and IDOT employees, some hundreds were hired not following the correct anti-patronage rules, and then there was the Neighborhood Recovery Initiative where they gave $55 million to groups in Chicago, and it started just before the election in 2010, and Quinn swears, and the leader of the program at the time before a legislative panel said there was a violence problem, we needed to do something quick, and the Republicans continued to call it a slush fund, although I don't know if there were any smoking guns that came out of the hearings they had. Negatives work. People are disgusted. Are they doing the right thing? And
people are absolutely frustrated and disgusted with all of the negative ads. We've seen $21 million worth of ads in the last 3 months. And people are very, from what I'm seeing and from what I'm hearing, people don't like it. They're saying, hey, the only time we see these candidates is just before the election. You don't come into the community very often to find out what we're feeling, how we're thinking about and what we'd like to see different. And so people are really frustrated with all of this negativity that they're hearing. But can you really run a positive ad against Bruce Rauner when he's calling you a corrupt governor, one of the most corrupt governors, saying that you're probably going to end up in jail? Can you run a positive ad against something like that?
And interestingly, linking Pat Quinn with Rod Blagojevich, even though those two, I mean, Quinn did vouch for Blagojevich when he was running for a second term, but those two didn't even talk for the last year and a half Blagojevich was in office, because Quinn didn't like Blagojevich, and it was returned.
Yeah, we all hate negative ads. We all say boo, hiss, negative ads, but they seem to work, unfortunately. And when you talk about the appearances, we went, I think in West Central Illinois, we went a couple of years without Pat Quinn showing up. We've had him there twice in the last 3 weeks. He dropped in, about $1 million to Quincy University and Illinois College and McMurray, again, and that stirred up some issues, because what's he doing giving this public money to these private institutions when public schools are so far behind in their payments? And I know it's different pools of money, but still, it was a conversation that was had. And then he came to Macomb last week and dropped off $35 million for a pet highway project up there. So yeah, tis the season for presidents.
On that highway?
Maybe.
Yeah.
But if I own a business in Macomb, I don't want you going around me. So okay.
As you said, Governor Quinn hasn't been in these central and southern Illinois areas until it's time to make his presence known, so voters remember that they have to go to the polls in a few weeks.
They ramp up their schedules, but whatever. Understood. I wanted to just briefly talk about, this is the first year under the new law that instead of lieutenant governors being chosen by voters separately at the primary from the governor candidate, which was how we got the pairing of Quinn and Blagojevich in the past, each candidate had to pick their running mate and run with that running mate. So Pat Quinn chose Paul Vallis, who used to live in Springfield and was head of the economic forecasting arm of the legislature, and then was head of Chicago Public Schools and ran schools in other cities. And Bruce Rauner picked Evelyn Sanguinetti, who is a first-term member of the Wheaton City Council. How's that going for each of them?
Well, we see Paul Vallis in the community, in Chicago at least, a lot more than we're seeing Evelyn Sanguinetti. We're not seeing her out very often, although yesterday she did appear in the Quincy area to do some things out there. I think what was key in selecting their lieutenant governors this time around was that they wanted to appeal to minority voters. You had talk of Governor Quinn selecting a black woman out of Chicago. Obviously, he didn't go with her. And then Bruce Rauner obviously appealing to the Hispanic voters and going with Sanguinetti. The problem is she doesn't have much experience, neither does he, as it relates to government. Bruce Rauner.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Bruce Rauner.
Right.
And so that entire ticket as it relates to government is really inexperience. They're banking on his business savvy, and Governor Quinn is attacking that, saying, well, your businesses have failed. And then you have Paul Vallis, who, as you said, does have quite a bit of experience in state government. So if something happens to the governor, which one of those people do we want to take over? Do we want someone who has government experience, who understands the state, or do we want someone who's been a one-term councilwoman in Wheaton?
Well, she says that she's a mom and hasn't come up the traditional way, but she would be good because she has the government experience of the Wheaton City Council, and they have like 54,000 people, and they're a highly rated city. That's what she told me in a story that should be coming out in our paper this weekend.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Vallis ran for governor against Blagojevich.
He lost by about 20,000 votes, and Roland Burris was also in that race, which took many votes out of Chicago, and he almost beat Blagojevich. And at that time, oddly, he didn't like to fly, we think, so he didn't come downstate quite enough. And Blagojevich just cleaned up downstate because he made all kinds of promises, and we see how that turned out. But yes, he did run in 2002 and nearly became the nominee for governor.
Okay, and we haven't seen him, in West Central Illinois much. We have seen.
He has been in Springfield a couple of times.
I think. But I remember when he was running for governor. I remember he came to Quincy back in '02, but just not this time. But no, clearly, as much bashing as Pat Quinn has gotten the move, the selection of Paul Vallas was the best thing that he did, and I think that's going to be the thing that probably, if he ends up pulling it out, I think the Vallas selection is going to go a long way.
Yeah, well, Vallas has been a great surrogate for him because every time there's something they want to say negative about the latest problem with the Rauner business, they send out Vallas because Vallas is not scared to talk to the press and can talk detail.
Right.
And when he was in Springfield, he came to an Illinois Education Association facility and was talking about the Rauner budget and how they thought, of course, Rauner hadn't yet talked about as much about how many service taxes he might impose or been very clear about it, but just saying they want to cut all of the income tax back to 3% from where it is now at 5%. Vallas is talking about, and Quinn keeps repeating this, 1 out of 6 teachers will have to be laid off. That may be, we don't know what the legislature would do with Rauner's plans, and we don't know exactly what Rauner's plans are, but he has talked about not, letting the state income tax roll back, but maybe not as fast, and imposing a sales tax on some services, which right now Quinn is against, even though I think he's...
But he's also talked about freezing property taxes or doing something, and I'm like, how's he going to pull that off?
Well, you'd have to get the legislature to make it happen, and the Democratic legislature's not going to do it.
And you're going to hamstring local taxing bodies by doing that? I mean, when his first plan came out, that was the immediate red flag I got, was him monkey...
The
Rauner plan was trying to monkey around with property taxes. It was like...
Yeah, but the other thing is people like to hear, well, yes, he'll hold the line on taxes, and he'll pay more for education, more for prisons, and this, of course, is what Quinn says is a fantasy, and this is part of the argument.
Because the argument is, how is he going to continue to pay for education? How is he going to continue to pay for social services when you're going to freeze property taxes, which is how we pay for education,
and when
large part, and then you're going to roll that tax increase back. He does want to do some taxing on services, but the plan that he released raises what, $500 million, 500
it might have been more, but it kind of depends on your estimates.
So,
and cutting back the state income tax, you're talking like
billions.
I think it's $4 billion is about half, and that's what they said would be the school cut. At least that's what the Democrats say of the Rauner budget. So, and the Rauner people don't answer a lot of questions about this. On the other hand, it's a campaign, and he also says the economy will pick up, businesses will come, more people will be working, therefore paying taxes. On the other hand, people who are skeptical of this say it can't happen fast enough to fill that gap.
Right.
So that's where we're at. Lower ballot races are getting a lot less attention than the governor's race. That always happens. The governor's race has all of this infusion of cash. Some of the close ones are, Judy Bar-Topinka is the current comptroller, and Sheila Simon, the current lieutenant governor, is running against her, the Democrat. Topinka is the Republican, although she's very moderate in some of her views. Any idea where that one's going?
I think that, Judy's got such name recognition. I mean, yes, Sheila Simon has name recognition because of her father, but I think Judy has done so well in so many statewide races. I think you'd have to give the edge to her.
I agree.
Okay, we'll see where that goes. It is interesting. Judy has a couple of top staffers who, they have a kind of a housing nonprofit that they started after she lost for governor in 2006, and a couple of her top staffers are still getting a salary from that, and they make like $40,000 or $50,000 a piece, and that's been an issue that the Simon campaign has tried to impose. I don't know if it will overcome the popularity of Topinka, and Sheila Simon again has a good name, and Topinka is just she talks rather proudly of taking on Rod Blagojevich for the good cause that she did. And anyway, Mike Frerichs is a state senator from Champaign, and he's taking on Tom Cross, who is in the House and was leader of House Republicans for state treasurer. They've been kind of contentiously going at it about what is the proper role. Tom Cross says he would potentially sue the General Assembly or the governor if they don't pass a balanced budget, and Frerichs says you're overstepping your bounds there. You're not the Attorney General, even though you talked about running for it before Lisa Madigan said she was going to run for another term. So any idea where that one's going?
I think that one depends on the top of the ticket.
Really?
You haven't seen a lot of ads from them. As you said, we have seen some back and forth from time to time, but nothing that's really gained any sticking point. So I believe that one, voters will kind of vote down the line on that race if I had to guess.
Bob, you seem to think the same.
No, I think Cross has a better organization. I think Cross wins.
Okay, there you go. And it's interesting because Frerichs is it 6'8"? So it's the standing tall thing. And I saw at least one ad. I don't know how much money he has to run an ad, but we always, reporters get views of things by email now all the time, and there was one funny thing about it. It keeps reaching things for people and that kind of thing. We also have, of course, Lisa Madigan running for Attorney General. She's the incumbent against Paul Schimpf of perhaps appropriately named Waterloo, Illinois, even though he's a former military prosecutor and worked in Iraq. And Mike Webster of the suburbs is running as a Republican against Jesse White for Secretary of State. Where's that one going?
Incumbents. Yeah.
Okay, and State Senator Jim Oberweis is taking on Dick Durbin. He's been running a lot of ads about Durbin as a bully and, asked the IRS to look into a political opponent. When he was talking about the letter that Durbin wrote was actually about Karl Rove's organization, Crossroads GPS, some years ago when Rove was raising all this money, and it's money you don't know where it's coming from. And most of it was being used to run ads and campaigns. Does Jim Oberweis, the ice cream salesman through his Oberweis Dairy and also an investor, have any chance against Dick Durbin?
I don't know if he does. I think it's an uphill battle, but to what Mr. Oberweis has been saying, I mean, my company has been the brunt of a Dick Durbin, I don't know if bullying is the right term, but we ran some anti-Durbin stories, I guess you could say, that he didn't like, and we received a letter from Mr. Durbin's staff that hinted about FCC looking into our license.
And when was this? And which
last year.
Which company is
Star
that?
Radio.
And is that Quincy?
That's the parent company.
QuincyJournal.com. Oh, okay.
That is correct. Yes.
And Oberweis has, like Bruce Rauner, has gained some ground with African American voters, which again is not very common.
He's been working it very hard
in Chicago. Yeah,
going out to street corners
on the corner, giving out ice cream or things like that, and so.
And working with pastors too.
Absolutely, and again, that is not very typical for Republican candidates to go into Black communities in Chicago and gain some ground.
Yeah, of course. And he talks about Durbin's longevity, although Senator Durbin, who lives in Springfield and also, and it comes home like every weekend and is often has a Sunday afternoon press conference on his lawn to show that he has not lost touch with Illinois. He leads on a lot of interesting issues, including like for-profit colleges and how much federal fund or student loan funding goes to them, and how many students get duped by going to the wrong place and ending up being in debt. So he has taken on lots of issues. We'll see where that goes. After the election, legislators will come back for a veto session. That is, of course, being discussed in the campaign because Rauner is calling on Quinn, no matter what happens in the election, don't raise the tax, which means keep it at the 5% for individuals, the income tax after the election, as Quinn has wanted to do through the budget that he proposed, which he claims is honest and Rauner claims is taking money from your family. Are we going to see a lot of action in the veto session, or and perhaps we could discuss, what if Quinn wins and what if Rauner wins?
I think if Quinn wins, we definitely keep that 5% tax rate in place, and if Rauner wins, we see some sort of tax in place that may not be 5%. But it won't be the 3% that he wants to.
Right, which he says he just wants to get to over 4 years. Do you think the Democrats would give him adequate revenue? Because the Democrats have they have supermajorities in the House and Senate now. The Republicans are hoping to eat into that. But regardless, you'd have a Republican governor. Will the Democrats give him enough money to operate the government, do you think? Or would they try to starve him to, make him squirm after he has badmouthed politicians so much?
No, I think they will try to make come up with some kind of budget that will work, because I don't think the legislature will want to completely hamstring the constituents. I mean, those people need their money and their funding. By the way, I think the income tax gets locked in regardless of who wins.
Oh, you do? Yeah. You think Rauner? Well, Rauner's been.
Rauner won't have any. It won't matter. They're going to lock it in during veto session.
Yes. Oh, during veto session,
yes,
you think?
Correct.
Okay. But they need. I guess they can pass it. If it doesn't take effect until the next fiscal year, they can pass it with just the majority. Okay. Mm-hmm. Interesting. We haven't mentioned the Libertarian Party. The Green Party has been on the ballot in Illinois in some past years. They did not make it this time. They turned in petitions, but they were knocked off the ballot. The Libertarian Party, however, did. There's a guy named Chad Grimm. I think he's from the Peoria area. He's running for governor. There's a whole slate. I know, when he was introducing his group, I believe he feels like there shouldn't even be public education. I mean, he's very libertarian, and yet I'm not sure if it matters so much. And there is a labor union, Operating Engineers 150, that's providing some money to help the Libertarians do some advertising, but mostly it's just going to be the protest vote, and that does hurt Rauner more, does it not? Where are we going with that?
I think so, yeah.
And some have even gone as far to say that the Democratic Party is actually even pushing some ads in favor of the Libertarian government, hoping that, or candidate, hoping that people will vote for him, because that typically takes away Rauner's vote, or the Republican vote.
We think, yeah, because you'd probably the more conservative folks
That sounds about right.
who might otherwise be Republican, and Rauner has been making it clear that he's not as conservative as probably some Republicans want, because in the Chicago area, he has done there have been ads that show that he would be okay with same-sex marriage, as is now the law in Illinois, and he's pro-choice on abortion, so he's certainly no hardliner. Just a couple of minutes left. There are constitutional amendments on the ballot as well, one for a victim's Bill of Rights, which some say may impose more trouble on the court system, but clearly that sounds like something that's probably going to pass based on what it sounds like. You get notified if a perpetrator who hurt your family is coming out of prison, stuff like that. You can go to hearings. And another is against voter discrimination, which is really a Democratic amendment to make sure that there are no voter suppression laws, as some states have passed. Those things going to be helpful to one party or another?
I think they'll probably help the Democrats a little bit.
Absolutely.
I think they'll help them bring out the vote. I think that's kind of why they're there.
Yeah, well, and we know there are also 3 advisory things on there. One is a millionaire's tax, a 3% surcharge. One is raising the minimum wage to $10. Again, it won't have the force of law. And one is that your insurance should provide birth control if it provides other drug coverage. And we know that, again, this seems to be, it's a non-presidential year, and the Democrats are trying to make sure their base gets out.
Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. There we go. Well, we are just about done. We hope everybody can put up with the rest of the campaign, and I'd like to thank Bob Gough, Nicole Wilson for joining me. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Study and vote and enjoy it. And thanks very much for watching. We'll see you next time on Capitol View.